So today, inshallah, we're starting with a new lesson, week 5. We're starting with these concepts, prototype, inheritance classes. So these are part of like JavaScript. So JavaScript is a language that interacts with the browser. So it's important for it to have like, I mean, any language has classes, but JavaScript in general, it needs to have a way to duplicate things. So if you ever see something like prototype, think of it like prototype car prototypes. So if you ever heard like this is a prototype, meaning like this is just the first copy, and then we're gonna take this and make more copies from it. So prototype in general is just like a copy. So also we're gonna learn some few other concepts like this. So in this lesson, we'll explain the 4 concepts of this. We might not explain all of them. I'll pick 2 of them that are important because you'll see in real world those concepts. So this keyword is really important in JavaScript for you to understand what it means and what it's used for. So this keyword, and also we'll explain what it is. You also describe and use prototypes, constructor functions. Constructor functions are just normal functions, but they're used to create objects basically. And also we will learn inheritance. Inheritance, it's same as in the real world. Like if you inheriting like your parents, meaning you're taking their wealth, whatever they gave you after they're gone, right? So inheritance, and we'll build a basic. We're not gonna build a game, but I'll show you in different examples. We'll describe and demonstrate class syntax. So I'll show you how classes work in JavaScript, and we will see how we can it says convert pseudo classically instantiated program into class syntax. So you will understand what this means later, but basically we're going to convert between function and class, right? So, and the function would be prototype. Okay. So let's just get started. So this keyword in JavaScript, what is this? And it's kind of like a meme. So if you say what is this, it's basically like you're it's the word this. So if you say what is this, you're pointed to it. So let's see in the browser. So if we go into the browser, go to console log or the console section, and we just type this and we say enter, what happens? It gives us a object called window, right? What is that? What is the window object, right? So the window object is the whole browser. That's what it is. So the window object is global object that describes everything about your browser. For example, going back, going forward, all that stuff, refreshing, everything about the browser is described here. This is a really long object. Like it has hundreds of things. You don't need to know any of this, but you just need to know that the keyword this in JavaScript means when you're inside the browser, it means the window, or it means global. So if you ever see window, we're talking about the global. Remember we talked about global scope and local scope, right? This is the global scope. So window is a global scope. This, without mentioning inside a function or object, it's a global thing, right? So let's see. Let me write an example here. So that's the this keyword. I don't want to take too much time on the this keyword, but you just need to understand like there's different ways you can use it, right? So for example, this has for example, so let's write here this. By itself, it's global scope. And if you use the browser and you write it in the console, it will print window, and window is global. So by itself is global. And then if you put it inside a function, So this is a function, and you put this in here. This will not work. The reason for that is the function needs to be converted to prototype, and we'll understand what that means later. But before the function, let's actually create a object. I think it would be better if I use something like let's go to Rebel. I want to show you guys in example. Let's create a new Rebel node. Create. So this keyword. Okay, so let's type it here. This keyword. So if it's global, this this equals to window. But a local scope, we could create a object. Who can help me create object? How do we create an object? Like an empty object, let's say. Let's create an empty object. Right here. Let's call it something like let's call it like a student, right? So the first thing we need to do is we need to create a variable, right? Student. How do we create an empty object for student? What do you guys think?
Empty meaning you won't put anything
Just
for a
yeah,
student,
there's
like,
nothing in it. It's basically just an empty one. So remember array and object, the difference. So keep in mind that this is something that you guys have to put somewhere, because I think it's best if you guys take a note. So right now, take a note. So this is an object, empty object. So if I ask you empty object from now on, this is how it looks. So we say const student is equal to curly brackets. That's an empty object. Could also close with that, but you don't have to. So if you want to create an empty object, that's how you create an empty object. Okay, now we want to put some information about the student. Who remembers how do we write something in an object? What do we use? Let's say we want to write the name of the student. What do we write here? Can we say something like Muhammad, like that? And maybe let's say the age, 20. Who can help me with this? How do we write something in an object?
would we be using glasses or something like that?
Remember objects, what do objects have? They have a way of the way we write objects. How do we write them?
Key pair values.
Key bear value, right? Key bear value. What is a key bear value?
Okay, so you say name equal to quotation. I mean, not equal, like a colon Muhammad with
Yep.
quotation. Okay.
Muhammad. So this is key bear value. You guys have to keep this in mind, because if I ask you to write an object and I ask you like write an object for a student and I give you the information, it's really important to know, because this is all JavaScript. All JavaScript is object. So if you learn one thing about JavaScript, is object, right? So keep that in mind. So learn objects very well. So if I say write an object, an empty object, you write it with just the curly brackets only. Keep in mind that always curly brackets, not always, but a curly bracket with just a variable is an object, right? Functions have a curly brackets, but curly bracket by itself with just a variable is an object. If it's an object, it has to be this way. Sometimes you see it like this. You see like that, right? So we learned objects, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. So please go back to the notes for the lesson we learned about objects. I think it was introduction to JavaScript. I think it was yeah, introduction to JavaScript right here, objects. So these are objects. This whole thing explains what objects are, how to add something objects, how to remove all that stuff. So let's continue. So today we're not learning objects, we're learning prototypes and classes and inheritance. But all that comes down to object, right? So we have to learn objects first. Okay, let's write city. Okay, let's say MBLS. And then let's so now this is basic objects, but also we want to add a method. Who remembers how to add a method in an object? We want to add a method. Who can tell me what method is? What is a method? It has there's another way you could refer method. What is a method? Okay, let's write it here. A method is equal to a function. It's just a function. Method is a function, but it's usually inside an object, right? So this is really, really important to know. So let's say we write a method here. So if you write an inside object, you just give it a key first. So let's say hi, and then we write a function here. Okay. So the name of this function is say hi. And then we could just open it as a normal function. Okay, we could console log in here. And then we could say hi. Okay, so this is basic object with one method. Who can help me with how do we print out, let's say, the name? So we want to console log the name. How do we do that? Keep in mind, you could always go back here. Objects. Okay, this is one object. Accessing object, accessing value. Is when I say accessing value, I'm talking about this. These are the value. So if I want to access like Muhammad, this is what I do, right? Or something like this. So how do I access Muhammad in here? There's two ways to access, remember? So when it comes to objects, there's two ways to access. Dot notation, or what was the other one? You guys remember? Dot notation or bracket notation, right? So you don't have to know the bracket notation, and also you don't have to know the name. So sometimes you could just say a dot, that's fine, because you don't have to know the notation. All that might be jargon. But always keep in mind that if you have an object, and this will come back, if you have an object, you always grab the name of the object, and then you say dot, and then whatever you want to access. So you just say name here. Okay. Sounds good. Any question about objects, how they work? I think if you guys watched the video I sent, which was this one, this one right here, this would have helped you a lot, because this one is basically talking about in detail what objects are, things like that. It's actually a playlist. So it gives you a lot of information about that. So if you're confused about what I'm talking about, go back to that video or the lesson we talked about objects. Okay, so let's move on because we have a lot to cover. Okay. So there's four things we need to know about this keyword. Okay. If we go back to our normal lesson, which was the 5th one. Okay. So this keyword. This keyword is very important in JavaScript, understanding its cases and usability. So they're basically saying it's really important. Okay, so it has three principles. What are the three principles of this keyword? So it has the window or global object binding. Basically, this is basically saying what I showed you guys, which was when you just type this, it's connected to the global object, which is the window object. So if you just type this is what we're talking about on the global binding. Okay. And then principle 2 is implicit binding, which I'll show you an example of. Whenever a preceding dot calls a function, the object before the dot is this. Okay. So just the example we're just doing here. What this is talking about is we could just say here within right here in this function or method, we could say console log, and then we could use a backtick, which is, it's not a quote, it's a backtick. It's above your tab in your keyboard. And then in here we could just write normal string, but we could also add some expression, JavaScript expression. So we could just say, hi, my name is, and then we could add some JavaScript here. And then we say this dot name. Okay. So this is referring to what now? What do you guys think? What is this referring to? So it's referring to something, it's implicit. It basically, it's not clear what it's referring to, but it's referring to something.
The student.
So as you can see, we have a name here, right? So the name is inside the student object, right? So this is referring to this student. So you could just actually say here, student, if you want, right? So in JavaScript, you could just say this. This is called implicit binding. It means you're not clear. You're just saying this, but you could just say, you could be clear and say you could add a student here. So you will see in a lot of languages, not only JavaScript, using this. Okay. So now if we actually print out the function, we could just say here, say hi. And it should print out, hi, my name is Mohammed. So this is referring to this. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's implicit binding. You could always go back to these notes and see the example and read about it. Okay. Implicit binding. And then there's a new binding. This is a we'll get to this, but this is the one you'll see a lot. Whenever we use constructor functions, so there's something called constructor functions. These are like special functions in JavaScript. They're not like a typical function. So let's actually see an example of a constructor function. There's different ways of writing it. This is one way, but let's see an example. So let's comment this out for now. Constructor functions. So just keep in mind that constructor functions are just functions. The only difference is they create a object. So remember, we just created an object here by ourselves, just by using this method. This is just a normal way of creating, but there is a downside to this. And I think the video I sent you guys, it talks about the downside, which is, let's say you want to create a multiple students, right? So you have like a college or something, and you want to create multiple students. Now you have to create multiple objects, right, in here. So you have to create multiple objects. So Muhammad has like student 1, let's say, and then student 2 is Hassan, student 3 is, you know, Hamdi, whatever. So now you're creating too many similar things. And there's a concept in programming. Who remembers that concept? When you don't want something duplicate. Anybody remember that? So it's called dry. So the dry concept, dry equal to do not repeat yourself. Okay. So the dry concept, which is do not repeat yourself, means now we have a student here. If we want to create another student, we have to copy this whole code, paste it here, and then say student 2, and then type a name here and fill out this information. What if you miss something? What if you misspell like city or, you know, things like that? Then you're screwed. Now you don't know what is wrong and what went wrong, basically. So to just avoid that, we're going to create a function that we will give like Muhammad, Minneapolis, and then we'll give this information. Hi, my name is, and then boom, it will create that information for us, right? I mean, not this one, not the function method, but we'll give these two, and then it will spit out, you know, that object for us. And so let me actually console log this so I can show you guys an object, how object looks like. Console log student 2. And if we print that out, that's how object looks like. So if you can see it clearly, but yeah, that's how it looks like. Okay, so let's go to constructor functions. That's what they call constructor. They construct. It's like a builder, right? So how do constructor functions work? So let's get to that. Find new bind. Okay. So this is we're still talking about this keyword. So this is the new binding. So new itself is a keyword, new binding. So let's create a function here. So let's create a function. We'll call it student. But keep in mind when you're creating a constructor function, you need to have a capital letter on the first letter. So we have to say something like that. So the first S is capital. So always construct functions. The only difference that you will see, other than like compared to other functions, is by just the S, the first letter capital. Okay, and then it's just typical function like that. Another thing is basically right now what we're creating is the information here, right? So we need to give that information as a parameter. So we say name, city, and let's keep it at that for now. Keep in mind that we cannot add the function inside it right now. You will learn how to do that later when we get to prototypes. Okay, so let's just so now we're going to use this keyword. We're going to say this name. We're basically saying, okay, so this, when we pass the parameter name, create an object with the name. Okay, let me just say here name. It's like that, simple. And then here this dot city, it's equal to city. So the name here is this one, the city is this one. Okay, so it's that simple. And then now we could create an object from this. Simple. This is where the new keyword comes, right? So if we want to create, let's say student 1, we could just say student 1 is equal to new, and then we say student. So this new is the keyword. See, it's a different color now, because of the editor knows that this is a special keyword. So the new means create a new object from this function. That's basically what it's saying. And then we give the name of the function, and then we give it the parameters. So let's say something like Ahmed, and then the city would be something like San Diego, something like that, whatever. Okay. So now if we console log student one, you should see it's just an object. So console log student one, it should just be a basic object with the name student, and then it has name Ahmed, city San Diego. Okay. Okay. Any question about that? This is the new binding, which is this one. So the new binding, you have to create a function that has written like this, and then give the information that way. And then it will just keep creating. So now you could just create a bunch of students from this. You could just say, so student 2, new student. The reason for this is now you don't have to worry about spelling this, and later you could add more here, and then only give it to the student that's needed. But we'll learn what that means when we get to the prototypes. Right? Any question so far? Okay. There's also the explicit binding. I don't want to confuse you guys, but the explicit binding is you explicitly connect this guy, the function, to the object, basically, using something called call. So you could read that more, but you wouldn't see that a lot. So that's why I don't want to cover it. You will see this, the new keyword thing, you'll see that a lot, and also the implicit binding, you'll see that a lot too. So the implicit binding is having this keyword inside here. So that greeting is referring to this greeting, and this keyword is referring to the object itself. So that's pretty much it for this. Any question? I would recommend if you guys watch this, this video, it will help a lot. So keep that in mind. Okay. So let's move on from this keyword. Now, let's get to prototypes, or prototype inheritance, because it's called. Okay, what are prototype? Remember that if I write something like prototype car, right? If I write prototype car, I'll get like a concept cars, right? So when something is prototype, it means it's the first copy. So if I give you like the prototype for my product, it means this is the first copy. This is basically the blueprint, let's say. So this is what we're gonna follow, and then we're gonna build more from that. If you write prototype home or house, you see that some futuristic, some styling stuff. Prototype product. You see that is some sketches and stuff like that. So prototype is usually a concept. So if we write prototype definition here, prototype, the first typical or preliminary model for something, especially a machine from which other forms are being developed from. So that's what prototype is. So that's what we're talking about today, is a way to create a function that we can create more stuff from. Okay. So let's say if we have a house here, this is a prototype house. It's very ugly prototype house. Okay. I'm not good at drawing. And then you can create more houses from that prototype. Okay. So these are the actual houses that you're going to create. Well, it has to be exactly the same. That's what prototypes are for. And then you can create more. That's why you see like a lot of times houses that are exactly the same. That's because the engineers or the architects, they created a prototype or a blueprint, and then the engineers, they followed that blueprint, right? So that's it. That's what it's all about. It's just a function that we can create more stuff from, right? It's the original function. all objects in JavaScript has a prototype by default. Okay. So let me show you something really interesting about JavaScript. So let's actually go to the console. So if we type something like const student is equal to empty object, right? And let's give it something like name, and give it Muhammad. Okay, just the same thing we did before. Now if we say enter and we call student, it should print out that object, right? So that's pretty nice. That's good. And keep in mind that console is just, you can run JavaScript in here if you want. But if we open this object right here, which we didn't give anything, it has a property called prototype already. So this is kind of connected automatically to that object. And that prototype has a lot of stuff connected to it. See? So all these things can be used, right? So prototype is automatically connected to objects in JavaScript. Also in functions, because functions are actually objects. Let me prove that. So if we write a function called say hi, and we just create a normal function, and we just do that, and then we say here console log hi, and we say enter, and we call that function say hi, and it says hi, right? Actually, give me a second. Should have that. I'm not sure what happened. Maybe the way I'm calling is different. But functions are actually, I think I should have said return. Functions are objects, and by default they will have this prototype. So we were gonna use that, and I'll show you how that even works actually. So this property is used as an object to attach methods and other properties that can be delegated down to the children functions and objects. When we say children, we're talking about the copies, basically. So the constructor function is a way we can build objects. We just saw the constructor function. So this is how it's built. A little bit different now, but we'll see a better example. Okay. Okay, so that's, take the code above to consideration. Notice that the animal is capitalized. See, the animal is capitalized. This is by convention only. When they say convention only, they mean like this is how everyone writes it. It doesn't mean this is the way you have to write it. But this is, you know, it's important so that the next person who sees your code can know that this is a prototype function or constructor function, not a normal function. Okay, a constructor function constructs objects. You can think of it as a template. Function itself needs to take an object to literal of some sort so that it can be mapped to that object to literal. So don't worry about all that stuff. I'll show you what that looks like. Okay. All right. So let's write some prototype function. Prototype. Okay. All right. So a couple of things about prototypes. So these are kind of like notes that you could keep, guys. So this would be so prototypes are just constructor functions, basically. So, and actually just there's difference between constructor functions and prototypes, and we'll see what those are. Constructor functions they build objects, basically. So constructor functions construct or build objects. Okay, so if I ask you in the future, what do constructor functions do? That's what they do. They build objects. They also give us ability to so this I'll show you this in example, but they give us the ability to pass methods. Again, what are methods? Who remembers? Methods. Who remembers what methods are? We just talked about it. Methods are functions. Yep, right here. Methods are functions. But when we say methods, the reason why we're using that word is because they're inside an object, right? That's generally the only difference. To pass methods, okay, across objects. Okay. Another thing is this one is also, I talked about it, capitalize function name. Okay. Capitalize, just capitalize, not capitalized. Okay. And then the last one would be it's missing. So this is the constructor function. It's missing the return statement. Okay. The return statement. So let's write a basic constructor function. So function, let's call it person. Keep in mind that usually when you write in a constructor function, you want to keep it generic. You don't want to say something like here, something like Muhammad or something like that. You don't want to call it something specific. You call it person, animal, car, things like that. Okay. And just a normal function. We're gonna pass something called attributes. So we're gonna put here. So we're gonna take all the values that we learned. So remember that we passed here a couple of values. We're passing those as one word. We're gonna combine all of them into one word. I think that's how attribute is spelled. Okay, and then now we're gonna say something like this dot name is equal to attributes dot name. Okay, and then we're gonna say this dot age is equal to attributes dot age. You could add more. This dot city is equal to attributes dot city. Okay. So what we're doing right now is we're creating these variables. These are just normal. I would say you could say these are like the key pair value, but for the constructor function, we're basically saying whatever we pass here, expand it basically, expand it to here. So remember that this isn't like an object, let's say, and we're just saying the object name dot name. So this object will have all the things we need. Okay. So this is basically it for the constructor function. We could add one more thing, which is a method. Okay. Let's add a method. So we say this dot something like speak, and we're going to say function. So this is a normal function. So we could just say return. We could say hello. My name is, and then we add the name here. So these are called template literal. Basically means you could just add JavaScript inside a text, right? Or inside a string. This dot name. Okay, so and we could just keep it at that for now. What did we do wrong? Oh, we didn't have the dot there. Okay, so this is normal constructor function. It's giving us this line because it's telling us we it's telling us to convert it to class, but right now we're not going to convert to class. And so you guys don't have to do this all the time. For example, when you become a developer, you wouldn't see this in like real world, but we need to learn this so that we can understand classes. So we're going to learn classes, which are the ones that are used in like real world, but classes are based on this. So classes look like exactly like this. Okay, so we have the constructor function. Now we want to create a new object from it. Remember, we're using the new binding. So who can help me create a person here? So let's say something like const, let's say Hamdi. What do we do here if we're using the new binding? Remember, we just passed here the new binding.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm gonna type new.
We use the new keyword, right? New. And then what do we do after that? So keep in mind that we need to grab the function name, right? The constructor function name. New person. So we're creating a new person. So here is where we pass the attributes. So these are the attributes here. This is where we pass. But the thing is, right now, we're not going to pass it one by one. We're not going to say something like name, something like that. We're going to add it in an object. So we're just going to say object here. Going to create this object and then just give the name. So name, Hamdi. And then now, so we did this, we're doing it again just to show you this is important. But now we added this method. Age, let's say 21. Then city, we could say something like St. Paul. Okay. All right. So now simple. So now if we console log Hamdi, it should give us a object with Hamdi on it, right? Simple. The Hamdi console log gives us an object with Hamdi. But the object has a method called speak. So we could use that to run it. So if we want to run this speak, all we have to do is just say Hamdi.speak. Okay. So now it should run this method. So hello, my name is Hamdi. Right. It's pretty nice. So now we have this. Any question about what we just did? This is called constructor function, by the way. Keep in mind, constructor function. We haven't done the prototype yet. Any question? Okay. So now you could create many people here, as many people as you want. It will, you know, you could use this as a blueprint. But now, the thing is, if we keep this here, right? If we keep this here, every time we create a new person, right? The browser or the JavaScript engine is going to run this function, right? It doesn't matter what we do, like every time it's going to run that person. I mean, this function, this method. So that could create like a issue with like the space or, you know, the engine. The reason for that is it's, you know, running a method inside a constructor function takes a little more time, especially if you have a lot of people. So if you have like 100 people you're creating from one constructor function and they all have method in here, then that could be a problem. Also, another thing is, let's say you want like Hamdi to have one method and then someone else, Muhammad, to have a different type of method. So they do different things. Let's say Muhammad does something else, or Muhammad, let's say he works at the hospital. Hamdi works at the bank or something like that. So you want to give them different method. So now you can't, because I mean, you could create different methods here, but now you have like, if you want to run Hamdi, you have a method that you don't need to use, right? So that's where the prototype comes. You just remove this whole method out of the constructor function. So let's copy this for now. Get rid of this console log. We need to comment this out because it's going to create a problem for us. Okay, so we have the constructor function, but now we could just remove this. We could take it outside. We could put it outside. And then now we could just use the prototype to create this method. And it's very simple. So you could always come back to this when you write in a constructor function, and then you want to add a prototype to it. So now all we need to do is remove this keyword from here because it doesn't make sense. There's nothing it's referring to. We're going to add the function name here, person, right? And then we're going to say dot prototype. Okay. And that's pretty much it. So now what happens is we created a method outside of this function, this constructor function, and it's referring to, it's part of this function. But right now, like if we want to create more, we could basically create specific methods for specific people. And it's not connected to our constructor function. So this whole method, this whole way of we're doing right now something, it's the old way of doing it. That's why it looks very clunky. It looks very not user-friendly. Because before 2015, this is how JavaScript was doing constructor functions. And we'll find out like how we can do it in a different way. A lot easier way, basically. Okay. So if I tell you create a method with a prototype, this is how you create a method with prototype. You grab the function's name, you say prototype dot the method's name, and then you could create that. Now this method can be used by anyone or not used, right? You could choose whenever. And if you run this with a lot of users, you're not running this basically. You're running this only when you call it. Okay. Any question about this? Any question? So it does the same thing. So let's actually try that. Let's console log here. And I think we have to create the object here. Okay. And now if we say Hamdi.speak, it should bring us the same thing, right? Okay. Any question? All right. So that's basically prototype. We could also go to prototype inheritance, which is inheriting this person, but I want to make sure we get to class because the class is the thing that we want to learn. Prototypes, nobody uses prototypes these days, but you just need to know that classes actually came from here. This is basically in the background, this is what classes look like. Okay, so we're going to talk about classes, but keep in mind that prototypes are also really, really important because in JavaScript, classes are not like just pure classes. Other languages like Java or something, classes are basically pure. It means it's built into the language to have a class, but in JavaScript, it has the functions, these constructor functions, and then they kind of used they converted the constructor functions into classes, but they don't have, in the background, they don't have classes. They just have functions that in the front end look like classes. So let's do that. Let's write about classes. Class. Okay. So classes are exactly same thing we just did. So classes are basically just like prototypes. So class, when you hear a class in Any language. As in program language, classes, or you could just say classes here. Let's keep it class. Class and object are basic building blocks of object-oriented programming language. Okay, so how do they look like? Let's actually go back here. So, okay, let's read this. So, because the original prototype system in JavaScript is rather clunky, right? That's what we said. So you have to use the construct function, and then you have to use the prototype to create a method. And because there are multiple ways to skin a cat and achieve inheritance, remember we actually skipped inheritance right now when we were doing the prototype. We now have a class keyword to simplify our lives significantly. With the introduction to class keyword, however, we gain a lot of abstraction. When you hear the word abstraction, it's just another word for kind of like hiding things. So you don't need to see all the stuff. Like you don't need to see explicit things, which is why it's extremely important for you to have seen how to achieve inheritance with the basically the prototype. So like the way we were just doing this whole thing, it's important for you to see because I want you to see how classes are simpler. Okay, this is how classes look like. They basically just, you write the word class, you write the name, and then you could add constructor. These are the constructor functions, but inside the class. You just say constructor. You don't have to write a function or anything. And then you give it the attributes here that we just learned. Do the same thing. And then outside this constructor, you can write methods. And we'll see how that looks like. So classes. Okay, so a couple of things about classes we need to take notes of. Classes are not hoisted. Okay. Who remembers what hoisted means in JavaScript? Maybe someone remembers it. You guys remember hoisted in JavaScript? You can Google if you want. In JavaScript, hoisted refers to the process where the interpreter appears to move the declaration function. Basically, what it means is you have a function here, right? And you could run the function here. You could console log it here. You don't have to put it underneath the function. Then the JavaScript interpreter will read this whole document one time and then go back and read it again. It will read it 2 times, right? So now it knows that there's a function called this, and then you actually call the function at the top. So it will tell you, hey, I'm going to move this function to the top. So this is called hoisted. And then it gives you the result, right? It does that automatically. You don't have to think about it even. Okay. So that's what hoisted means. So classes are not hoisted. So if you create a class, you cannot call it at the top of the class, right? You cannot do that. It will give you an error. Okay. Classes use strict. Okay. So they use strict, which means they're pretty much strict. You cannot play around. You can't have things that are not correctly defined. Things like that. Okay. So that's a simple definition. Let's write a class. Simple class. Write the word keyword class. As you can see, it's a different color. And then we do the same thing. But maybe this time let's actually create a blueprint of a parent. Okay, parent blueprint. So this is how you write a class. And then you don't have to do this. You don't have to add that. Just do that. Okay. Now inside here we could write the constructor, right? So you just say constructor. And then the constructor will take, same as at the top, it will take attributes. And then it's just a normal function inside the class. Now let's add a couple of things here. Let's say this dot name is equal to, of course, attributes dot name. Okay. And also let's add this dot location is equal to attributes dot location. Okay. And maybe let's add this dot work is equal to attribute dot work. Okay. So this is what class looks like with its constructor, everything combined all together. Now we want to add like a method, right? Remember, methods are functions. We want to add a method, we just go down, remember, outside of the constructor, and then we add it here. So let's say something like a job. So let's say this parent has a job, and then we will say return something like let's say this dot name, okay, works is a, let's say something like this dot work, or we should call this a job. So the job they do. So and so is a da da da. Okay. So this whole thing is, instead of us doing this person that prototype that speak da 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 all that stuff, that whole thing is this. This is a blueprint now. We could create other things from it. Easy. So now we could just do the same thing we did before, which is create an object from this, right? And still remember, we're using the new keyword. Okay. So who can help me? We want to create a new parent. Let's call this parent. Let's call Ali. How do we do it? Remember using the new keyword. So what do we do here?
We can say equal to, and then we can
What is that? Can you repeat? Your voice is a little bit far.
and equal to
Equal to new, yep.
and then we're gonna take the parent class.
Parent, yep. Because the parent is the class. The class is exactly the same as the constructor function we had, but now we moved all the properties of the constructor function inside here, inside this constructor thing. And so now it's just the same thing. So we just do object here, and we could just say something like, okay, we have a name here. Just say name is equal to Ali. We give a location. We just say location is equal to, let's say, Minneapolis. And then let's give it a job. Job is, say, a doctor. Okay. So now we created a new object from this class. Simple. But now we want to run this method. How do we even do that? So let's actually let's test this. Let's see if we can print out Ali here. We say console log Ali dot name. Will that work? Ali. Okay, that works. Now let's say job. Okay, we have an error, which is great. Line 14, not 14, line 105. What happened here? Something's wrong. Say this work the object. Okay. What went wrong? Who can help me with this? Okay, I called the job. Should have worked.
Is it 112 or 100?
Yeah.
Is it like 112 or 112?
112.
But you
You
show us where
should.
you need to determine which line is studying.
I can't hear clearly. Maybe my microphone.
No, I said, can you, it's not you, it's me. Waxaan ku yiri, wana tusi kartaa what you looking at to see.
Oh,
where
okay.
you're
So
getting
this
the
is
line.
I printed out
Print it.
ali.job, which is this method. And
No, I'm talking about error. How are you reading the error? Like which line, where are you getting the line? You can
okay.
see where to-
Yeah, so I'm looking at this error. I'm trying to figure out like, so sometimes errors give you like information you don't need. So this one's giving us this information. We don't need that. But it's saying ali.job is not a function. That's what it's saying basically here. Ali.job is not a function. So that means it doesn't know what that is. It doesn't know what, it's not reaching this ali, this job, I mean. And then at the end of it, it says line 112. So 112, which is right here. So 112, it means that's where it saw the error. So it's not giving us a lot of information. It's just basic saying, hey, this is not a function. And the error seems to be at line 112, which is basically where we printing at. So that's not going to help us. So I'm looking at, okay. What is the issue now? Return. Okay, maybe I did it. Return. What is it?
On line 112, does it need like a semicolon at the end of the console log? Is that
Yeah, I mean, in JavaScript right now, you don't have to have the semicolon. You could have it if you want. It's not 100%.
okay?
Yeah, you could leave it if you like. So what I'm thinking is,
Well, does it take return or return is not necessary?
it
The
should
return.
take a return. It should be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, the return should be fine. I think it's fine. Just maybe we need to add one more thing. Give me a second.
Do you need a comma after the doctor?
You need
Line
what?
109. Line 109. Do you need a comma after the doctor?
Yeah, you could add a comma. So the last one, usually you could just leave it if it's an object.
Okay.
So if you leave this one, that's where you have a problem. It will show an error here, you can see. But if you leave the last one, it's not a big deal. This should print out Minneapolis. That's good. And then let me look at my notes. 30. Oh, that looks good.
Ma'al, I think we should put like attributes, so should return the whole thing, right?
This whole thing. You mean
Yeah,
the method?
no, the one underneath of it, the function, the last one here, that one, the D 106.
Yeah. So 106, you said that we should add attribute here.
Yeah, like should pass attributes to the as a parameter for the parent, new parent.
I think this is fine because it's the way we were doing it. This is normal. I think it has to do something with like the location where things are. But what I can do is to fix this problem, I can just do console log here. So I'm thinking maybe the return is creating a problem for us. So now if we call job, it's not reaching that function basically. Okay, so this is how we I'm gonna okay, so the problem is we have job here and then we have function as a job and then we're defining a job here. So now when we call a job as a function, it's telling us, hey, that's not a function, which is true because it's just a string of a doctor. So now we're changing the job to work here, and then change this to work, and work here, and then work here. So now if we call the job method, it should print that out. Hopefully. Right there. Ali is a doctor. Okay. So I probably did this before. So okay. So let's move on. Any question about that? So now we're just basically calling this function here. And this function is returning this message, which takes the name here and then says is a, and then calls this a work. And all this information, we're defining it here, right? And then you could, print out other ones too, if you like. Any question about that? Okay. All right, let's move on. So one last thing that we need to do is we need to create inheritance, right? So this is the last one, and it's a big one. Inheritance. Maybe that's how it's spelled. I'm not really sure. Let's go back. Inheritance. What is inheritance? So inheritance, in general, the definition of inheritance in Somali is the hal. In normal definition is inheriting, to inherit something from someone. Basically, if your parents pass away, then they will give you their wealth and everything, so you inherit them. In that same concept, we're inheriting this parent class. So let's create a class for children, right? Because each parent has a children. So now we're going to create the child class. Okay. And also the child class, basically child class inherits the parent class. What does that mean? What does inherit? It inherits these properties. It inherits the name, the work, all this stuff. You could also inherit the job, but you don't have to. You could decide what you want to inherit, basically. And then, so think of it as like, so let's actually create a new drawing. Think of it as like normal family, right? So you have a parent here. The parent has children. So some things that the children inherit are things like basically like the color of the person most of the time. They will inherit, like when you have a children, not when you die. So when you have a child, the child will inherit from you things like your color, your race, language, things like that, right? They will take all that from you. Usually language is not like inherit, like it's not like genetic, but eventually your child will be similar to you in general. Like they will be very close to you. So that's what we mean when we inherit a class, or so to inherit the parent class, we use extend keyword, or extends. Let's say extends keyword. So you're basically extending the properties that this class has. So we're going to create another class, and we're going to extend that parent class. Another thing is the last one would be we're going to use another keyword. There's a keyword called super. Super will basically super will help us will help us inherit both the constructor or like you could say constructor information and methods. Okay, it will help us do that. All right, let's create that. Let's create a child class. So we say class child, and then we say extends parent. That's it. So we say child is a new class. It extends, it's just like English. It extends parent. So it gets stuff from the parent. Now let's create a constructor for the child. Constructor. The constructor, which same thing, we write attributes here. You can name whatever you want these attributes. You don't have to call them attributes. So let's actually use a keyword called super. So super is just a function that will copy like all the attributes for us in that constructor. So super and extend work together. Extend basically just copies the whole parent class, but then super basically gives us ability to copy the elements or the attributes inside the constructor. So it's a more basically gives us more information of what we can take. So super will take the same parameter as the constructor. And then now we have everything from here. So we have all this, right? So let's actually try that out. Before we do anything, let's see if we have all that info, all that stuff. So let's create a child here now. Let's call something like let's call them I would say new child. Okay. And then we create the object here. So let's see. So let's say something like name. See name. It's Farah. Let's keep it at this for now to test it out. So if we call this Farah console log it should print out that console log Farah.name. So Farah, okay, so that's good. So that's what we expected for it to print, right? Another thing is, did we copy the job? So let's try that out. But right now we don't actually have a job for Farah. So let's give this person a job. Let's call it teacher. Right? Because basically that's exactly we're doing the same thing we did for the parent. Job. Let's test it out. So if it works, if the job prints out here and it says something like Farah is a teacher, then that means this whole thing copied both the constructor and also the method. See, Farah is a teacher. So as you can see, we don't have to write this whole thing again. And that's the idea I talked about when I talked about like the dry concept is basically you don't have to write things again. You could just use this and now you have everything that the parent has, right? Another thing is you could add your own stuff. So let's say Farah maybe has a major or something like that, like in school, you could just say major, and you could just say attributes dot major. Okay, so this is specific only for child. So this is only for the child and not for the parent. The parent doesn't have a major. So now we could just say major here, English. Okay, so now if we run here and say major, it should show up here. Okay, so you could create your own attributes for the child. And also, the child also could have their own methods, right? So let's say study. Let's call it something like study and then open it and then return something like similar thing, but we're gonna say this person is studying this basically. Let's call it here major. And here we're gonna say is has studied, has. Okay, so now if we call here study, it should say Farah has studied English. Okay, so that's how you extend a class. Any question about that?
معلم,
Ah,
what about if you want to call the whole thing for Farah? Like if you want to return the whole thing, the whole attributes.
yeah, you can. You could just call Farah right here. Is that what you wanted? So it'll print out everything.
Yes, exactly.
But now you can see that the location is undefined. That means we didn't define location here. So that's why it's not shown there. Any question so far?
Haman,
Yeah.
what do you gotta return and then now you have this name, it could come out Farah, and then I would have is, and then this and then music teacher, this and then works, and then
Yeah,
has studied this major.
yes. So you could say so this that name would be Farah. So it would be is a, and then you say here so we say work. Yeah, you could say that because you don't see it here, but it's actually in here. You don't see work, it's not defined here, but it's part of this attribute. So this attribute, the reason why we're using super is because it's copying all these attributes from the parent class and it's superimposing, basically. I think that's where the word came from. Superimposing all the attributes from the parent on here. So now if we run it, it should run the dot job, not dot study, I think it was, because that's where we put it. We put it here, study. It should say Farah is a teacher.
Paano ito? Line ka din mabunag ka rin na where we say Farah is a teacher and studied this
Yeah.
major. Where basta may katapos ito.
Yep, and studied. Yeah, you could add more if you want. You could extend as long as you want. This dot major. Okay. So now you should say Farah is a teacher and studied English. Yeah. Could add as much as you want. And you guys in the homework, you're going to be using all this to build a game. You guys going to be building a game using class. So you're going to be inheriting some stuff, extending it, creating these methods. So you're going to be creating different methods that say different things in the game. So that's how we're going to do it. Any question? So originally our homework was, originally the game was you have to use the prototype to create the game. But now I'm modifying the homework. So you're going to be using class to create the game. And then for the prototypes, you just, I'm going to give you small light questions to explain what constructor functions are and what prototypes are, basically what are they used for, and a few other things. But the main focus is the class. I want you guys to know more about the class. What is this? What is this constructor? Why do we need to do static, this method thing? What is this extend thing? I think it's good to know this because this is going to come up a lot. You guys are going to see a lot of extend in the future. So I want you guys to know a lot about the class. If somebody asks you, okay, how do you inherit a class, and how does inheritance works in object-oriented programming like JavaScript, then you should say, oh, okay, so inheritance is basically you inherit the class and then you use super to copy all the attributes, all the methods and everything to the new child class, and that's how you should explain it. So it will take time to get all this, but I'll give you more practice, inshallah, in the homework.
معلم.
Yeah.
So when you're doing the class, you're gonna have the method outside of the function, like you're doing now.
What do you mean? Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
right now, stat is outside of the function, right?
Yep. So this is a constructor function. So yeah, you're gonna have it outside here. So always outside. The construction only will have the attributes. So something like this. Yeah. Any question? All right, let me show you quickly how the homework might look like. But I think it'll be better if I just record a quick video for you guys, because I need to change a lot of things. I don't want to confuse you. So I'll create a maybe 2-minute video about the homework, and you guys can do that. But as far as the class, I think we're done. Any question? And also you could always go back here as a reference. You see inheritance with class. You have the animal, you have the method here. Now, if you want to inherit animal, you say here dog extends animal, and then you could give a dog a method to park. All right. Any other questions? All right, guys, I'm gonna let you go. I'll send a video sometime today for the assignment. And other than that, please send the